I believe that Santa Cruz punches way above its weight when it comes to ocean conservation and coastal resilience. But we don't exist in a vacuum, of course. No, we're part of California. And we are so lucky to have a mayor in Mayor Fred Keeley who has decades of experience at the state and local levels. He authored some of the most impactful ocean protection legislation in California's history, some legislation that is still paying off decades later. So Mayor Fred Keeley joins me on today's episode of Science Solutions Santa Cruz to reflect on those decades of work, some of the mechanisms and some of the ways that science leads to solutions at the state level, where Santa Cruz is situated in all of it. And as he winds down his career and approaches retirement, he reflects on his successes and his challenges, and also makes some predictions for the opportunities and challenges facing us ahead. I'm Jonathan Hicken. Enjoy. In the studio with me today, I have current Santa Cruz Mayor Fred Keeley. This is also the man who changed and rewrote California's ocean protection laws when he was the California Speaker Pro Tem. He also serves on the Monterey Bay Sanctuary Fund. Fred, it's so good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Jonathan, it's always a treat to come to the Seymour Center. It's an even bigger treat to spend time with you. Thank you for including me in this wonderful event.
My pleasure. You know, I was expecting you to come in with your signature red jacket, but at least you're wearing your Jordans today.
Well, I'd be naked without my Jordans.
All right, which Jordans are you rocking today?
Rocking the sort of teal-colored good one. You know, I work under the theory that women shouldn't have all the fun with shoes. My second theory is that if you had a face like mine, you'd want people looking at your shoes. So those are my two guiding fashion principles.
All right, I have to ask, does Michael Jordan, the basketball player or the personality, has he influenced you or your work in any way?
No, I think it's mostly that I've influenced him. He wears Keeleys. I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but I'm a naturally ungifted athlete, so I'll wear basketball shoes. I'll let them figure out whether I might be able to play basketball. I can wear them. They can make up their own minds.
All right, this could be a controversial question.
Okay.
But do you have a stance on the Jordan versus LeBron James greatest of all time debate?
Yes.
Where do you stand?
What shoes am I wearing?
Okay, all right, say no more.
Don't have to.
Yeah, LeBron James is my age, so it's like I've basically grown up with the guy, so I gotta stand in his corner.
Fair enough. That's fair enough. I'm an old school guy, you know.
Honestly, we could talk basketball all day.
Okay.
But we're here to talk about science and solutions and policy as it relates to the ocean and the coast. You have been a part of these conversations, a part of these solutions. You've been at the decision makers table for decades now. And I want to rewind back to back to when you can remember the first time that you realized that this was going to be a huge part of your work and part of what you dedicated yourself to. Can you remember a moment when that became clear to you?
I think it's a series of moments over time.
Please.
It actually goes back to my childhood. We moved around a little bit. My dad had a job where he was getting promotions every 3 or 4 years, and so we'd move. I was born in Sacramento, then we lived in Modesto for 3 years, then Santa Maria for 3 years. Then we moved to San Jose, which is essentially where I grew up. But when we lived in Santa Maria, we were close to the beach in a sense. We would go up the coast a little bit and go to Avila Beach. And Avila Beach was a really sweet little town on the ocean there. And many people have probably been to it. And at the time, it had a Shell oil pipeline that went in there, and ships would pull in and they would be filled or emptied or whatever, as part of the oil process down there. But what we experienced as kids was literally tar on our feet. We'd go in and body surf, and then, come back out, and then you'd have literal little balls of tar surrounded with sand. They look like little golf balls of sand,
No
but
kidding.
they had tar inside them. And so then my parents had I think it was a kerosene little pan that we would step in and then wipe our feet off and then get in the car. And I always wondered what that was. It was like,
Kerosene.
And my parents would tell us what it was. It was, that's from the oil tankers and, the thing. And I'm 9 years old, 10 years old, but it stuck in my mind. It stuck in my mind. So then as I got older and we moved to San Jose, my parents would bring my brother and myself over to Santa Cruz in the summer, probably multiple days a week, and during the rest of the year, maybe every other weekend. And they were really early adopters of wetsuits. My brother and I got wetsuits. Now, think about it. I'm 76 years old. So I'm talking about when I'm 11 or 12. This is a long time ago.
Yeah, what was a wetsuit?
And exactly, this was real early on. And so we got wetsuits because it's too damn cold to go in the water here. But we loved coming to Santa Cruz. So that was a super big treat for us.
Yeah.
So between that experience as a little guy, getting wetsuits when we were pretty young, and being able to body surf and get in the ocean and so on and so on. So there wasn't a big question in my mind when I went to San Jose State and graduated. Where did I want to be? I wanted to be in Santa Cruz. This whole fall in love with the ocean part. As I became older and got into public life, one of the things I learned, and Dan Hafley, John Laird, Sam Farr, all those folks who were in the early days of the fight against offshore oil drilling, there became a way to focus in on those feelings and turn those feelings into action. I love the ocean. What can I do? There's a threat to the ocean. What can I do? And what was wonderful, and I think it's the good news and bad news now, too, with the renewal of offshore oil drilling possibilities and gas drilling and seabed mining and so on for minerals, that the opportunity is still there. We figured out a way years ago to have an effective response to the federal government, which we can't control largely, but the brilliant move of Gary Patton and others, Dan Hafley, Richard Charter, Rob Lee Levy, you can go through the list of iconic folks who've worked on these issues, building a wall from the Oregon border to the Mexican border along the California coast, saying, our local coastal communities will adopt ordinances to prevent onshore support facilities of offshore oil and gas drilling. That was a brilliant strategic approach. It worked. And as you know, now Dan and Justin Gummings and Shebra Kalantari Johnson and all the people who are here now are tapping into that experience and updating those ordinances as the federal government's threat has been renewed.
I think this intergenerational collaboration, though unfortunate that we even need it, is a fascinating pattern or something that's emerging right now, right? Where you and Dan and the others are mentoring and kind of showing us, this next generation, how it gets done. What does that feel like to you in this moment?
Well, it feels very good in the sense of wanting to, in effect, pay it forward. Right? Well, I was given great gifts in my life. I grew up in a family, a loving family. I have a brother who's 14 months older, a good guy. I got a good public school education. My health isn't pretty good. I've got friends and family, and I just feel like I live this very blessed and lucky life. So with that, I do believe comes obligations, and those obligations are this mentoring or assisting as we move along. And I try to do that in a variety of ways that are helpful. There's a scholarship thing over at the university that you're probably aware of, and some mentoring and serving on some boards and so on. But yeah, that's the idea. People did that for me. Right? And it helped shape my life and the focus of the public policy work. And it seems a moral responsibility to take that role and try to do something with it for others.
And it's our moral responsibility to sort of take the baton and carry on this work that you and so many others have been doing over the decades. And it feels like a real honor and a privilege to be able to stand on the shoulders of giants. So thank you for everything that you've done. You were starting to sort of tee up some of these big wins that you participated in and that you led in some ways. I mean, the original Blue Wall, so to speak, Blue Wall 1.0. You were also the pioneer of the Marine Life Management Act and Props 12 and 40 in the early 2000s, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Please tell us a little bit about how those came to be, and specifically, this is Science Solutions Santa Cruz. So, what role did science or scientific institutions play for you as those laws came to pass?
The situation that I walked into, and I'm going to, in order to go forward, I'll go backwards.
Sure, please.
So the situation I walked into in 1996 when the voters of the Central Coast were kind enough to send me to the California State Assembly as their representative, one of the things that was very clear during the campaign, and it was not a news flash to me, were two things. Number one, coast and ocean protection is not a partisan issue in the Central Coast. It's not Republican or Democrat, libertarian or vegetarian. It's
we
runs
all
across.
care about it.
It is a shared value. People talk about shared values. This is one of those.
I
in the
totally
Central
agree.
Coast.
I completely agree.
And I think that you can see that it's almost impossible to go too far.
Truly.
in trying to protect the coast and ocean and its resources and so on. So, having been a county supervisor, having been chief of staff to a member of the legislature who worked in that area, Sam Farr, before he went to Congress, he was an assembly member, and I was his chief of staff before I became a county supervisor. So during all of those experiences, I'm learning the economic value of the coast. I'm learning the science of it. I will say, I want to hasten to add, learning the science of it, I better say more like touching the surface of the science of it.
Sure.
Being one of those good liberal arts graduates, I do not pretend that I'm a scientist about any of this, but surrounding myself with really brilliant people who do, of which within 500 feet of where we're sitting right now, some of the world's greatest minds are working every day on
That's no exaggeration.
On an intergovernmental basis. It's really remarkable. So inspired by that, when I got to the legislature, here was my observation, that the Fish and Game Commission and Fish and Game in general, we are the only state in the nation that has our Fish and Game Commission embedded in the state constitution from the start. This wasn't some idea 15 years ago, oh, gee, we just woke up about the ocean and our natural resources, so we're going to put the Fish and Game Commission in the state constitution. This was from the beginning.
Like when California was
from
founded?
From the beginning.
Wow.
Now, I'm going to say it was a very different mission at that point, because what the challenge was that there was abundance of fish and game in the ocean, in the rivers, in the streams, in the creeks, in the lakes, on the land.
In the villages.
Herds,
yeah.
Herds of game, schools of fish, like it was everywhere. So when you come into the nation, 1849, 1850, and you put that in there, it's really not because, gee, it's a conservation play. What is it? It's a budget play. It's the hooks and bullet revenue. It's the fishing license and hunting license revenues. That's why it was in there. So when you're managing abundance, the answer was, we don't have to manage much at all. There's no reason to.
Cash starts flowing in through tax revenues,
there you go.
And boom.
And the science was not there in those days, mostly anecdotal if it was there at all. And indigenous practices were where a lot of the knowledge was.
Sure.
And so by the time I get to the legislature in 1996, California is no longer rural, agricultural, sparsely populated. Now you have, when I got there, almost 40 million people, 70% of whom live within a 1.5-hour drive of the coast.
Oh, my goodness.
That is an enormous pressure on our nearshore coastal resources. And I have been told by the science side of things that as you get closer to the shore, the density of the ocean, what is in the ocean, it gets more and more dense.
In terms of life or
so
resources.
You're getting closer to the shore. And that's the 3 miles that belong to the state of California, create the obligation for the state to manage that well. So we went from managing abundance to managing scarcity. Because by the time I get there, there's these series of collapses in fisheries.
Sure.
And changes in the dynamics about who uses the nearshore coastal waters as part of their dietary habits and so on.
That's right. There was a collapse here in Monterey Bay, right? The groundfish collapse in the late 90s, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, okay.
So, again, I'm not a scientist, but I'm representing the Central Coast, which at that point had a national marine sanctuary. Leon had just created the National Marine Sanctuary 3 years before I got to the assembly. So the question is, what is the state doing in this regard? And what I had learned from being chief of staff to a member and from being a member of the Board of Supervisors and then early on as a legislator is taking on big compound complex issues. There are two keys to it. Number one, broad stakeholder participation. That's obvious. The harder one is having the patience to do this. This is not something that happens where you're taking an entire management regime from passive to active, from little regulatory authority to a lot of it. How does that affect the folks who are in the water, rely on the water, adjacent to the water, etc., starting with, frankly, all the economic issues, and then going to all of the obligatory conservation management issues. So I'll tell you a little story about that.
Please.
So in thinking about how to start, my legislative director, a wonderful guy named Dave Bunn, who I'm going to Sub-Saharan Africa with next year when I retire. But he's a wonderful guy. He worked for me, and then he became Jerry Brown's director of the Department of Conservation for 8 years. He has a PhD from the vet school at Davis. I mean, he's just a really brilliant guy. And we mapped out a plan. How are we going to get this marine life management, marine life protection? How are we going to get these bills through? With Pete Wilson at the end of the road here. This is my first term in the legislature. Second 2 terms, Gray Davis was the governor, but first term, Pete Wilson's the governor. So I've got a Republican at the end. Now, probably certainly in today's environment, Pete Wilson would have been considered a very moderate Republican. Sure. I get people's continuing upset with him over immigration issues and so on. Those are totally legit. But on environmental issues, he was a very reasonable Republican. So what we did, we thought a lot about this. The very first thing we did was travel down to San Diego, meet with the sport fishing community, which was real proud of the work they were doing in white sea bass recovery in these pens out in the bay. They were so proud of their work, what they were doing. It was all volunteer, and they had scientists to talk to at Scripps and so on, and they had this wonderful white sea bass recovery program, and they were terribly proud of it. And we went and spent a lot of time with them to seek their advice and counsel, but also to build a relationship with Pete Wilson's friends.
Ooh, was he from San Diego?
He was the mayor of San Diego.
Okay.
He was an assembly member from San Diego. He's big buddies with the sport fishers. He's a sport fisher. He'd go out on their boats. They're really tight. That's the first place we go.
Brilliant.
Go to them and say, we're thinking of this. Can you help us think this through? They were more than happy. Skeptical,
Understandably so.
but pleased that somebody else, because their white sea bass program was only there because they were seeing declining fish stocks. And so rather than every port, every harbor, every place along the coast having to have their own voluntary, let's see if we can put something from the grassroots up to save our particular fishing stock, why not at least think through,
What would it look like?
Is there an appropriate role for the government in this that you can live with somehow? So we spent the next 18 months doing that, working with sport fishers, commercial fishers, people in the tourism and recreational industry, people in the diving community, people in the port and harbor community, up and down the coast of California, and built a coalition of folks who, after spending a lot of time with each other and sorting out their red lines, I can do this, but not this. Well, then I think I can do this, but not this. And it just kept getting closer and closer and more comprehensive as we moved along. Here's the punchline in the story. We go down to this is the last year Pete Wilson is governor. We're now down to the last night that he can sign bills. We are now down to the last hour that he can sign bills into law. And his Secretary of Resources is calling me. I'm in my Capitol office, governor's downstairs in his office, and I'm calling a guy named Doug Wheeler on a regular basis. I'm like, has he signed it yet? No, he's had it on his desk 5 times tonight, and he keeps pushing it aside and taking something else. And then he'll look, and they'll push it aside and take something. I said, oh, my God. He said, but he's getting the calls. And I said, oh, that's great, Mr. Secretary. Glad to hear that. The last bill in the last hour that Pete Wilson ever signed into law as governor of the state of California is the Marine Life Management Act.
Yes.
And so the story's a good story. But then the question becomes, after the Marine Life Management Act, Marine Life Protection Act, is it doing anything?
That was going to be my next question.
So, it's an old saw, but it's true. If you can't manage it, you can't. Or if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. I get that. This is especially true in this subject matter. If you don't have really good data, you can't track that data over time. It becomes very difficult to say, well, we're going to start guessing what we should do in the management regime.
Yeah.
So then I authored a bill called the Ocean Science Trust Act. And it created a very unusual entity. It created a nonprofit corporation in state government.
What?
I know.
Okay.
And the idea about that was so that it could receive outside funding as well as state government funding in pursuit of good iterative ocean science, testing whether the Marine Life Management Act, Marine Life Protection Act, and other ocean-related statutes were having the desired effect. Now, that, Mr. Scientist, poses a big question, which is, can you really get useful data after 5 years of looking in the ocean, even 10 years looking in the ocean, even 15 years looking at
Yeah, we could have a whole hour on that alone.
Oh, boy,
Right.
I'll bet
Yeah.
we could.
Yeah.
Having said that, they built an evaluation regime to take a look at that. And at the 10-year mark and the 15-year mark, they put out reports through the California Ocean Science Trust that, in their view, says that there is a measurable positive difference in terms of the size of the fish, the big old fat female fish, which you want in the ocean, I am told.
Yep.
And so those are getting bigger. What is the operational way to do this? The operational way to do this is largely through a construct called marine protected areas.
That's right. MPAs.
And one of the things we did at the very beginning of this is we looked at MPAs because we didn't invent. I've never had an original thought in my life. I sure as hell wasn't going to have one when I was in the legislature. But what we did is we looked at, there were MPAs all over the place. But they were basically like painting lines on the ocean. Did they have any monitoring? Did they have any enforcement mechanism? What were they? Didn't seem to mean much.
Yeah.
So that's why we attached this monitoring component to it, so that these MPAs had real purchase to them. They really meant something when you put it in place. Some people think marine protected areas may mean, oh my goodness, mean I can't fish there at all? No, it doesn't mean that, right? These are marine protected areas for purposes of sustainable management. And where it hasn't been sustainable, return it to sustainability. That may have limited entry, limited catch, all kinds of issues, but it is not an outright prohibition.
Yeah, or occasional closures because there needs to be a rebound, but the intent is not to just exclude human activity at all.
Because that's a hammer.
Yeah.
That's just a big sledgehammer when things need, in the scientific, in the ocean, my goodness, One of the things we also did was we said, rather than dealing sort of species by species or this, and this is something I was taught. I was taught so much in this process as a liberal arts undergraduate, is the concept of the water column. I didn't think about it. And they said that is a key to the building of the marine protected areas. We are dealing with what is in the water column, not just this species or that size or what does it take in the water column for all of this life to live its best life.
Right, truly.
And so, and that's all comes from the science guys and gals that know like so much more than I do. So that's one of the pleasures of being a legislator is I didn't need to be an expert.
Yeah.
What I needed to do was make sure to get experts around me.
Yeah. And I think this whole story you've just described, I think some people have branded it the Keeley style. This is something in my research, I found people referring to it this way. So
nice.
And it's this kind of like what I'm hearing you describe as, to me, it feels like almost the purest, most positive form of democracy in a way, right? Where you really are bringing in the interests of everybody who has a stake in it. And understanding what is that win-win-win, what is that shared interest, what is that shared value, and how can we build a state that protects and celebrates that and uplifts it. And it seems to have worked. And not only did you give it teeth, but you found a way to fund it.
How
about that, right? If you haven't visited the Seymour Marine Discovery Center at UC Santa Cruz in a while, or ever, you really should come visit us. We are right on the bluffs of the beautiful Monterey Bay with an aquarium full of local species and a bunch of hands-on science exhibits that help you understand what's happening in our ocean and along our coast. We are connecting the incredible research happening at UC Santa Cruz with real-world solutions for our coastal community. We don't want science to just sit on a shelf. We want it to shape decisions, inspire kids, and help our community feel equipped to act. So if you care about the future of our ocean and our coastal community, or you just want to experience a place that makes you feel a little more connected to it, come visit us at the Seymour Marine Discovery Center. Science Solutions, Santa Cruz. Now, with Props 12 and 40, did those props, which I think were 2002 and 2007, roughly?
2000 and 2002.
Okay, 2000, 2002. Did those propositions fund the California Ocean Sciences Trust?
A little bit, but not much.
Okay.
So largely environmental bonds, and thank you for mentioning I authored 2 environment, and they came together the same way these management issues came together, which is 2 years for each one of them, traveling up and down the state, because those environmental protection bonds were not just wet side, it was wet side and dry side, so it was for the whole state, both ocean and terrestrial. Those were long negotiations. The thing that I liked about those 2, the short answer to your question is they were largely capital in nature.
Got it.
As opposed to funding operations.
Sure.
So when you sell a bond, you want to get something directly for that. Sell a bond, build a park. Sell a bond, do this.
Build
restore
a
a wetland, whatever it might be. So to the extent that those kinds of investments helped, which I think they did, but the ongoing operational funding for, let's say, the California Ocean Science Trust is an annual appropriation process through the state budget process, combined with contributions they receive from applying for grants.
Philanthropy.
Yeah. I did a event for them a couple of years ago at my home and raised money for what it is they do. The California Ocean Science Trust, the value they provide is they are the science advisor, the ocean science advisor to the executive branch of state government. What we did a couple of years ago at the event at my house was raising money so that they could also have the ability to expand their capacity to be the ocean science advisor to the legislature as well. Let me just say for a second why I think that's important.
Please.
I'm a liberal arts, the third time I mentioned it, liberal arts undergraduate from San Jose State, right? You know, there we go.
Go Spartans.
Yeah, go Spartans for sure. We do have known predators, by the way. And I think most of the time those predators win, which is sad. But anyway, so in no possible way could I be considered an expert on the ocean. No way I could be considered that. So what becomes really important then is, who is it in the legislature that does have that kind of knowledge? So you look over the legislature, 80 members of the Assembly, 40 members of the Senate. If you're going to be an ocean person that knows a lot, you're probably going to be coastal legislator. And you're probably not going to be from Fresno or Colusa County or whatever. Probably not going to be. So let's look over the coastal legislators. Nope, can't find myself an ocean science person there. So my point is this. If there's a bill in the legislature on education, every legislator's gone to school, right?
They can relate to it.
They can relate to it.
They understand the value.
There you go. There's a bill on insurance. Everybody pays auto insurance, this insurance, that insurance, right? People do. So there's a lot of things that go on in the legislature that there's somebody who probably knows something about it, or more than one somebody, or everybody has had their own personal experience with it. Ocean science, not so much. So when a bill is in front of the legislature on coast and ocean protection, whose voices matter? How do you evaluate that? And for a very, very long time, before the Marine Life Management Act, the Marine Life Protection Act, the seafood industry, called the Seafood Council, had enormous sway in the legislature. A gentleman named Rob Ross was their lobbyist for a long time, very smart, very aggressive, had his own science, right, with him, talking to legislators. So when there is no counter to that, to a lobbying entity with campaign coffers and all kinds of other things representing the Seafood Institute, which is the seafood processors, that's who they are. They're not the folks in the boat, big, medium, or small. It's not them. It's the seafood processors. And they can make a product out of anything that comes out of the ocean.
Sure.
So their issue is not how much can we conserve. It's don't put any boundaries on the throughput from the ocean to our canneries.
Sure.
Don't put anything in the way of that. So without thoughtful, serious work that legislators can rely on, how do they get their bearings in that? How do they get their bearings? So I think the California Ocean Science Trust has given the legislature and the governor and the general public a trusted voice, a trusted source. What is the condition of the ocean over time? As attempts are made to improve that, is there a direct relationship between that policy and things getting better, worse, or not changing? That's a scientific question. That takes a lot of people who are very smart and do serious research. and aren't trying to drive an outcome. And so I think that those combinations, thinking long-term, how to put the play together, make sure it holds together, put an evaluation mechanism, make sure that's funded adequately. So I think that's the kind of the whole circle of activities.
And that's the flywheel one. And that flywheel, it kind of seems to be spinning, at least, least as far as I can see in this region. Looking back, I mean, the Marine Life Management Act and Marine Life Protection Act, those were passed in the late 90s.
Yep.
And so we're now, coming up on 30 years since those were passed. When you look at Monterey Bay today, you're going for a little walk on West Cliff, you're standing at the tip of the wharf, you're looking out at the bay. What do you notice about that work you did 30 years ago and how it's showing up in our community today?
I love how you framed that. Because one of the things I talk about with regard, this was especially when I was doing the work at the front end, trying to put the coalitions together. This is what I would say to people. We would meet oftentimes, at a restaurant on the coast, in Avila Beach or San Luis Obispo. We'd drive out to the coast, whatever it might be. But people were, really locked into the coast. And I would say to them, we'd be sitting at a restaurant, or we'd take a walk on a boardwalk or walk on a beach or on a wharf or whatever. And I would always say, let's stop right here for a second. I say, okay. I said, because we're looking at the ocean. I said, let's turn around and take a look. So we're looking back of us. There's all this built environment. There's all this. There's all that. I said, you can see every bit of human activity simply by turning around and looking at that. Now let's turn around and look at the ocean again. We would. I said, when people were standing here 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, it looked just like this. You can't figure that thing out until you get in it. And so that is the importance of us doing this work. It is so easy to say, oh my goodness, we're overbuilding this, or oh my goodness, on the landward side, we're taking out this wetland and putting in a whatever. Oh my gosh, we shouldn't do that. Now you step 1 foot into the ocean. This is a whole new world. This isn't our world. This is somebody else's world in there. But how we evaluate that and understand it is so different. So it's easy to always be amazed by the beauty of the surface of the ocean, and hard to say, how is that changing? So that's why it became so important to have this very broad base of people who know what the hell is going on below the surface of the ocean.
Who can tell us about what we can't see.
That's right.
I mean, I think about it, it's like, that is hard to evaluate, right? Because we look out at the bay. I look out at the bay, and it looks natural.
Beautiful.
It looks beautiful. And I don't have a ton to compare that to, because while I've lived here, it's not like oil rigs were here and then disappeared.
That's right.
There's not some big thing to sort of like notice. Since I've lived here, there haven't been huge shipping containers coming through,
right,
or cruise ships coming through. I've never seen that. So when I look out, it looks the same. So but that is success in a way, right?
It is and it isn't. It isn't in the sense that it shows you nothing.
Right.
Unless it's an oil spill.
Right, sure. Sure.
But other than that, how is it we see it?
Yeah.
Does the oxygen disappear and you have a die-off in in our little small craft harbor that stinks up the place and so on? Yeah, periodically you have that.
Of course.
Those are natural processes. But in terms of this day in, driving up Highway 1 or, going down the Big Sur coast or whatever it is, it is to understand it, understand the threats, then see what the cascading consequences could be if there is no action, then action and monitoring and so on. Long process for something that, look, even if you look up at the sky, you can see the man-made different, whether it's a airplane leaving a trail, or it's it's getting a little hazy today. I wonder what that is.
Sure.
Now, we're lucky in the Monterey Bay area because of our natural air conditioning and our air quality, but we know when we travel around, that isn't the case everywhere. And so it's another case where you can just see it yourself, but you can't just see it yourself.
Yeah, isn't that an interesting? The nature of ocean protection is that it is not visible to the average person.
And the average person loves it like crazy.
Right,
though.
it's both. It's both.
Yeah.
And therefore, these scientific, especially these long-term scientific monitoring programs, like some of the ones that are happening right here at UC Santa Cruz and throughout our region, all the more reason that these things are so important for decision makers like you and others at the state level and all the different municipal levels in our area. That those must continue to exist if we care to continue this work.
Well, and the good news for us in the Monterey Bay area, just pause and think about, we're at the Seymour Discovery Center. It is surrounded by local, state, and federal research, regulatory, etc. entities are all dealing with the ocean.
You're talking about NOAA. There's a NOAA establishment here, and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife is here, and of course the UC Santa Cruz Research.
At least those.
Yeah, and then rotating set of partners. Exactly. Right, of course. Yeah.
And then you just hop down a little bit, because this is I'm very proud now. Moss Landing Marine Lab, which is attached administratively to
San Jose State
University. So I got to brag on my peeps a little bit here. But the Moss Landing Marine Lab, then you get to Mbari, then you get to the aquarium, then you get to Hopkins Marine Station associated with Stanford University. I'd be willing, now of course I'm not a scientist, I'd be willing to hold this up against Woods Hole.
Oh, hell right? Yeah. Bring it on, Massachusetts. Come on.
But you know what I mean? It was like
in
35 years, this has become one of the half a dozen greatest concentration of ocean and marine mines in the world.
It has to be. It has to be.
And so this goes again to the ease with which we can work as a community on this public policy issue, because people totally get it all the time.
Fred, look, the thing that I think is remarkable is that some of the work that you've done over the decades, 30, 40, 50 years in the making, you have not, in my perspective, not simply, provided the sort of legislative mechanisms and the funding for the work to happen, but you have established the foundation for an entire culture to be built upon, right? Where we have been able to rely on the state for the protections that we can reliably build these research centers, because we can count on these things existing into the future. We can count on this shared value, and it's written into law. And so an entire community, an entire region has been able to be built. All of these 5 research stations, plus all our state and federal partners, could make the decision safely knowing that these protections existed right here in Monterey Bay. And so much has emerged. My job, quite literally, my job exists because of some of the work that you and your contemporaries and others have done. And so thank you.
Certainly welcome.
And it's a tremendous impact. And when you look towards, you're coming up on the end of your term, and we haven't even talked about your work as mayor yet. You're coming up on the end of your service as mayor here. By the way, the first directly elected mayor in Santa Cruz's history.
Just a little asterisk on in the modern era.
Modern era, pardon me.
Modern era. Basically, we call that everything after World War II.
After World War II.
There was time off and on where there were directly elected mayors, but in the modern era of the city, I'm the first directly elected 4-year mayor of the city.
Okay, thank you for that. In any case, still a unique distinguishment. You're coming up on the end of your time. When you think about science and ocean policy and ocean protection and all of these things that we've been talking about, what is something that you're concerned about for the next generation of leaders, and what is something that you are optimistic about?
I am optimistic. I'm going to start with that one. I'm very optimistic because of the enormous investments of capital and intellectual capacity in the Monterey Bay area, together with the folks at Tolonaker, the folks down at Caltech, the folks here, the coastal resources up and down California. We're the hotbed. I'm willing to stipulate that, but we're not alone. There are other very high quality, internationally recognized researchers. Additionally, in this area, let's think about who my successor in interest in the legislature, John Laird, was my successor in interest. John Laird was assembly member for 6 years. Then he was the secretary of the California Resources Agency for 8 years under Jerry Brown. I mentioned earlier Dave Bunn, my former legislative director. He was director of the Department of Conservation, which is in the Resources Agency. John Laird, Resource Agency Secretary, right after we've really gotten these measures approved in law. Now, in legislation, getting a bill passed and signed by the governor is the end of one thing, but it is definitely not what makes that law work. A governor's signature and putting it on the books is the beginning of the next phase. And that's especially true where the issue is not, well, we're lowering the speed limit from this to this, or, it's not that kind of thing. This is a very complicated subject matter. Okay, fair enough. But now Pete Wilson's gone. Jerry Brown is there. Jerry Brown's got a budget challenge walking in the door. He's got to figure out how to deal with that. It's not unreasonable if you know Jerry Brown at all. He's a very progressive, liberal Democrat, except on budget stuff. He is one tight-fisted guy. He's always been that way. His first 2 terms and his second 2 terms, that's his deal. And I think it is good for liberal politicians to pay attention to that. That is, I think, a lot of why he is, in my view, the greatest governor in the history of California, because he kept that. So he couldn't be attacked from the right that he was just some profligate, tax and spend liberal Democrat, just another one of those people, also called my people. And I get that, why the criticism is there, but I'm pretty much that guy. But he was able to have 16 years as governor because of how he dealt with that. So he comes in, there's budget challenge, here's this new law. How much is he going to appropriate in a tough budget year to operationalize that law? What's he going to do? Well, what he did was he did fund it. And the Secretary of the Resources Agency, John Laird, was at the pointy end of the spear to do that. So Santa Cruz has been very fortunate that it just turns out that the author of the legislation, I'm gone by that time, right? I've written it, then I'm termed out of the legislature. In comes John Laird as the Resources Secretary with Jerry Brown. They believe in it. They fund it, they make it, they do use it as the ocean advisor, science advisor to the executive branch. How am I happy? I'm way happy about that. I think that's really good. Rather than downside, I'm going to say the challenge, the ongoing challenge that I see. It's very small for me, the part I'm going to talk about. The legislature, since I was there, has changed a great deal. When I left the legislature, I became part of something called California Forward. California Forward was looking at whether California was governable anymore. Couldn't get a budget on time, get a budget, wasn't worth having waited for it. Can you do big things? Or is California just tied up in its underwear and can't get out of its own way? And so we took a look at that, and we did the Citizens Independent Redistricting Commission, majority vote budgets, and things like that. But as we were going through all of that, the legislature is changing a lot, not a little bit, a lot. So when I was there, 80-member assembly, we had 47 Democrats, clearly had the majority. But there's only 6 numbers that matter in Sacramento.
They are
80, 54, and 41, 40, 27, and 21. There are 80 members of the assembly. 54 is 2/3, and 41 is a majority. 40 members of the Senate, 27 is 2/3, 21 is a majority. Anything that matters takes a 2/3 vote in both houses. If you want to put money in your bill, 2/3. You want your bill to become effective upon the governor's signature rather than January the next year, 2/3 vote. So, and anything that matters has either one or both of those in it. So the reason I bring this up is to say we didn't have 2/3 vote in either house. So I needed to get every Democrat and a handful of Republicans in both houses to make things work. And at that time, the majority, the Democratic majority in both houses, largely held every coastal seat. Then as you went inland, it started becoming more Republican and more Republican. So geographically, Republicans represent more geography, but less people. Starting after the Citizens Independent Redistricting Commission's first redistricting, which got rid of gerrymandering in California, what happened is you started seeing the Assembly and the Senate changing very rapidly. So let me do it again. When I was there, out of 80 Assembly members, we had 47. How many Democrats do you think are in the 80-member Assembly today?
I honestly don't know.
62.
Whoa. I thought it was going to go the other direction.
There are 18 Republicans and 62 Democrats in the Assembly. Remember, the magic number was 54. You don't even have to get every Democrat now. You can get to 54 just within the caucus, giving some people a pass if it's too tough a vote for them.
What's the implication of that? Yeah.
Well, the question is, how did you go from 47 to 62? Well, all the coastal seats were already Democrat. And the east part of the state is going to remain very, very Republican. It's all in the Central Valley.
The Central Valley, okay.
So what was the switch? This is very obvious as soon as you look at a map of the state and put the names of the Assembly members on it. You replaced moderate Republicans in the Central Valley and certain rural areas with moderate Latino Democrats. There is a reason that the Speaker of the Assembly, a Latino from San Benito County, there is no way there should be a speaker from San Benito County. They are from L.A. or San Francisco or L.A. That's where they come from. Because the L.A. delegation is monstrous. It is huge. It's like 30 members of the Assembly, all from L.A. County, right? So you can put the play together. Now what it is the gravity, the pull in the Assembly is the Latino caucus. Latino caucus is the largest caucus in the Assembly, larger than the Women's Caucus, larger than the Black Caucus, larger than the Environmental Caucus, larger the Latino caucus. You got that many members, you can elect Assembly Member Rivas as your speaker from San Benito County, because it's not about whether he's from a big area or smaller, it's member of the Latino caucus. Here's the issue, and I want to be very careful how I say this, and I talk about this a lot. The value system, and I've spoken with Mr. Speaker about this. I host an event at my home every year for Mr. Speaker. I love Speaker Rivas. He has been nothing but good on the issues I care about. I think he's a highly honorable speaker. The value system when I was there of the majority within the caucus was coastal Dems. So environmental issues had a lot of sway and pretty high on the priority. For the Latino caucus, jobs and housing is the highest value in their hierarchy of values, followed closely by jobs and housing, and right on the tail of that is jobs and housing. And so what happens is there could be a tension between jobs and housing and the environment. And as you know, since 2017, the California legislature and the governor have passed 137 bills to tear down the barriers of development. They've taken 85% of the local government's authority away on land use and replaced it with their authority. That is largely a function of the new majority in the Senate and the Assembly, because jobs and housing is the high priority. Now, with that thought in mind, which is not an insignificant political fact, how is it then that we continue to make progress in the ocean? It's not to say that the Latino caucus does not value the environment. They do.
Understood.
And I'm not saying every member of the Latino caucus has exactly the same mix of values, but as a caucus, I say it with no fear, because I talk to them. It's not as if I'm thinking about it in my house and never talk to anybody. So there's a common agreement that that's the case. So then it becomes, how do we do two things? How do we keep the ocean as a high priority, as the legislature is tearing down the California Environmental Quality Act when it comes to building? Can they see the difference between that and the ocean? Can we maintain that difference? The answer is yes.
How?
Through two things, two ways to measure that. Continuing to fund those projects in the Resources Agency that operationalize the public policy goals of the Marine Life Management Act, Marine Life Protection Act, California Ocean Science Trust Act. To continue not only to have the Ocean Science Trust there, but to support expanding it to become the Ocean Science Advisor to the legislature. A request, a welcome piece of information, a welcome change in how information gets to leadership. Having said that, let me go to the one that's really, I think, the challenge. I'm 76 years old. In my lifetime, until 15 years or so ago, the majority population has looked like me.
Mm-hmm.
Not exactly, which is the best news for people, but you get the general drift. And in my lifetime, in the last 15 years, that's not the case anymore. So then you go and you look at higher education. You look at your institution, University of California at Santa Cruz, or go on any campus of CSU. Holy moly, any campus of CSU. And I'm in the minority. And it is largely Latino students. I don't know what the next one would be, either Asian or white or whatever, but the Latino student body is very, very big. Now the question is that Latino student body, where are they gravitating? Where are they going? What are the majors they're looking at? Oh, business, engineering, this, that, education, so on and so on. How about the sciences? Well, somewhat in the sciences. How about in the ocean sciences? Well, somewhat in the ocean sciences. So the issue for me becomes, as the future starts to unfold here, who are the scientists? Where do they come from? What is their personal value system and cultural value system taken into the work that they're doing? So my thought is, and I stole this from Caltech, because, again, I've never had an original thought in my life. The University of California at Santa Cruz was very kind to name an environmental lecture series for me called the Fred Keeley Lectures on the Environment. And what I tell people all the time is, the best news about the Keeley Lectures on the Environment, Keeley doesn't lecture. Then people go, oh, tell me more. Who does? So we've had former Interior Secretary Bruce Babbitt. We've had Sylvia Earle's been deeper in the ocean than anybody ever. We've had a lot of glittery people give that lecture. But a few years into it, I felt really uncomfortable. So I went to the chancellor and I said, hey, I feel really weird, because usually to get this kind of thing, you need to have done one of three things: an act of scholarship, $1 million donation to the university, or die.
I have done none of those things.
Nothing close to any of those things. Unless you call writing bills acts of scholarship, and I think that is a huge stretch. So I said, yeah, I just kind of feel a little funny. It's George Blumenthal all the time. He said, well, what do you want to do about that? I said, well, I'm not a rich guy, but I could put a little bit of money into an endowment, and maybe we do a Coastal Scholars Endowment. And what Caltech found, so I put a little bit of money into it. Other people put in a little money here and there. But now we have $641,000 in it right now.
Yeah, congratulations.
And really, so people are so kind and generous in that. What I'm going to say next drives the university crazy because it's out on the edge of, whatever for them. But here's what I've noticed. Caltech, who I interacted with when I was putting some of these bills together, I went down and I talked to this guy down there who said, we have this really cool program. We have students in our programs, undergraduate, graduates, postdocs, and all the rest of it, who are in a particular program or they're doing a body of research of some kind in a team way. And some of them, we have found over the years, need to leave their project for 2 or 3 months in the summer to go earn money for their family. It's a cultural thing. And what they figured out, because when that happened, they were finding they were losing, those students would lose 2 or 3 months of the team project, and hard for them to plug back in and sort of carry their own weight, etc. Nobody felt good about that. They didn't. Their team members didn't. It was like, oh, that's too bad.
Sure.
So what Caltech figured out is, how much is that? $3,000 this summer. Here's a check for $3,000. Send this to your family and stay on campus. That's the program.
It's a bridge.
Basically.
It's a bridge.
And this is not a loan. There's your money. There you go.
That is brilliant. And has it proven successful?
And it's proven successful. So that's the model I adopted in the California, or in the Keeley Coastal Scholar Program, attached to the Fred Keeley lectures on the environment, which, as I've said before, Keeley doesn't lecture. And that provides 4, 5, 6 scholarships a year for students to be able to remain on campus and stay with their program. The reason I think that's important is it just turns out that that's oftentimes part of a population that is the emerging majority in California. So to kind of bring full circle, the demography of the state has changed, the demography in the legislature has changed, the demography in some of the science world is changing, and to have the best chance for that working out for those that are going into the marine sciences, let's make sure they don't have barriers to success.
Yeah.
So that's what we do. We got an event coming up on May the 8th.
May 8th. By the time this comes out,
right here.
we'll be looking. It'll be a few weeks ago by the time this comes out.
But I really appreciate you folks at the Seymour Center making this venue available. We're going to have a lot of fun. And Liz Whiteman, who is the executive director of the California Ocean Science Trust, will be our speaker.
Fabulous.
And Secretary Panetta, who of course, authored the bill which created the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, and co-authored a great ocean report with the wonderful Julie Packard.
Fabulous.
Secretary Panetta will also be speaking at that event. So it's and it is a fundraiser for the Keeley Coastal Scholars. And
I hope
just
you raise
them all.
Boatload of money for that program.
Thank you,
Fred. I would love to have you back sometime because I feel like we're just beginning. We're kind of just scratching the surface here.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to plug or anything you want to leave listeners with before we wrap up for the day?
I'll make it real quick.
Please.
I've been in 4 different public offices, for a long time, and I am on the downward slope here. About 7 months left. So this year, the first 3 years as mayor were get things done, get an affordable housing funding measure done, get the downtown expansion plan approved, make sure no building's taller than 8 stories, and do this, do that, do something else. There's a lot of challenges, a lot of work to be done. Decrease street homelessness by 50% without arresting people. There's a lot of big public policy challenges. We worked real hard on that with great colleagues and people in the community. The 4th year, as I see it, last year in my public life, is land the plane safely. I don't need to be the center of trying to get everything done. In fact, it's probably wiser to hand things off. So what you'll notice is there's, by the time this airs, there will have been an reopening ceremony for the reconstruction at the end of the wharf. You'll notice instead of the mayor being there, that Scott Newsom, council member, whose district it is, he's going to lead for the city. Similarly, on all this offshore oil, gas, and seabed mining issue, Shebra Kalantari Johnson is the leader. I asked her, look, you have a district that has a lot of Westcliff in it and Coast in it, in your council district. You're going to be here for many years after I leave. Same thing with Scott Newsom. Let me empower and help them build a record and help them build relationships. So that's how I see this year, is land the plane safely, help support my other colleagues, because the way I put it to people is, I'm a man with a past. They are people with a future. So let's go with the future.
Hey, that's coming back to that intergenerational handoff that's happening, and it's underway. And so thank you for being mindful of that, and thank you for positioning yourself that way, because that allows the rest of us to just kind of hit the ground running. And so, Fred, this has been an absolute pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for coming on today.
You're a kind man, Jonathan. Thank you, my friend. Keep up the good work at the Seymour Discovery Center.
Thank you. All right, that does it for the podcast. Thank you, Mayor Keeley, for coming on the program today. Congratulations on your retirement. Thank you for everything that you have done throughout your entire career at the city, county, and state level. Monterey Bay and Fred Keeley are stories that are indivisible, so thank you for all of your hard work. Thank you to Edith Belmont for editing. Thank you to Cassidy Beach for production, and thank you to Valerie C2 for distribution and socials. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.